Okay, Anne, we're ready for you when you are ready.
Excellent. Okay, welcome everyone to the Ukiah Unified School Board meeting. We have a regular board meeting, June 18th, 2020. We are meeting by Zoom as authorized by the Governor's Emergency Executive Order. Tonight will be our first night having live public comment, so we ask everyone for their patience as they are let into the meeting and allowed to comment, and that way we can hear your voice rather than just reading the public comments that are submitted by in writing. And we thank staff for making that technical adjustment and making this all possible. So we are reconvening in open session, and we will start with our flag salute. I pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to
and
the
to the republic
for which
which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice.
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ian. Our report out from closed session, we have a few things that we'll be taking votes on later, and we specifically discussed items B1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and 8, meaning that there were 2 items that were not discussed. So those items are now considered off agenda, and if anyone wants to comment on that, we'll be doing that in just a few minutes, very shortly. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Trustee Mulgard, I had one report out on B8.
Okay.
Um,
Will you do that now? Okay,
By
sorry.
Van Sant and seconded by Fernandez to approve a certificated leave of absence for the 2021 school year, and it was roll call vote 7-0.
Thank you. But the rest we'll handle when they come up in the agenda?
That's correct.
Okay. Board members, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I so move, or I'll second
I
that.
so second it.
I'll just stay out of it.
Well, there's definite movement and seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we will proceed with the agenda as written then. We're going to take one item out of order. We're going to have our student report from Ava Mortier, who is off to Barnard this fall, but we're going to have her student advisor report now earlier in the agenda.
Hi, everyone. I wanted to start with the disclaimer that I don't have a super long report today because school's been out, so this will be kind of quick. First off, I recently learned about the District Equity Task Force that has been created to address curriculum and other problems related to equity district-wide. And I think that it's a fantastic idea. I haven't talked to my fellow class about it just because we've been out of school and we won't be in the district next year, but I think it's a great idea. And I know that while I enjoyed the education that I received from UUSD over the past 8 years, there's a lot I wish that I had been taught about diversity and equity that was lacking in the curriculum in almost all of the subjects and classes that I took. And I think that this is a great first step towards educating each new generation about equity and racism problems that UUSD needs to play a larger part in. So I was really happy to hear about that. On another note, Ukiah High's graduation production occurred on June 4th and 5th, as I'm sure a lot of you saw or heard, and it went really well in my opinion. And the video was originally supposed to release on June 13th. However, because of technical difficulties, it's been delayed, and the administration should have an updated release date soon on when everyone can watch it for everyone who wasn't able to come with a senior as immediate family. And of course, everyone wishes that it could have been a regular graduation in a normal year. I think that a lot of seniors and adults were pleased with what was able to happen, and even people that were skeptical of it at first came and told us after that was really impressive what you guys managed to pull off. So I just wanted to share that. Additionally, information about the release of yearbooks and the virtual school-wide awards ceremony should be coming out soon as we conclude our final normal end of the year events. And this will be my last ever meeting. So I wanted to thank you guys all for the past year. And I loved having the opportunity to come to these meetings. And the next board member, the next student representative for the board will be Mason Hoppy. He's not here tonight, but I'll make sure to give him a full rundown of what his job will be when he comes to his first meeting in August.
Tell him that we're
Thank
really.
you, Eva,
Thank you.
and good luck to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ava.
Thanks so much.
We have a little gift to thank you too, but it hasn't arrived yet. So we'll have to, we're meeting in Zoom anyway, so I guess it doesn't matter.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now go on to C5, public comment for items not on the agenda. I have received a list of people who are in the waiting room, ready to make their public comment. And again, I just ask for patience since this is the first time we've done this. So our first speaker will be Wendy Morelli, and on deck will be Kimberly Valley. And again, a reminder to everyone that we don't engage in a lot of back and forth when the public makes comments, but that's not because we aren't listening, and it's not because we're not going to follow up. It's just the nature of public meetings in California. So could we please have Wendy Morelli?
President Mulgard, am I timing public comment as I would in an in-person meeting or not?
Sure, you can. I was going to do it myself, but it might be better. You can just give me a hand wave when they get to 3 minutes.
Great.
That would be great.
I've just admitted Wendy Morelli.
Thank you. Wendy Morelli, you have 3 minutes to make your public comment. Welcome to the meeting.
And President Mulgard, maybe remind people to take themselves off of mute. It looks like she's on mute.
I thought Ian might be able to override her mute.
Am I on mute?
No,
You're unmuted
you're
now.
no longer on mute. We can hear you, Wendy. Thank you for joining the meeting.
Well, thank you, and thank you everybody for just getting through our heat wave here today.
Mhm.
I wanted to weigh in on the Hoffman property school site, and I was told that it was taken off the agenda. It's in a written statement, but I just want to encourage us going forward, if it won't be decided for a while, if we could maybe have the community come together and work towards some solutions. And that's my statement for today.
Thank you. Okay, next we have a public comment from Kimberly Valley and Malia Meyer on deck. Kimberly, are you with us?
Kimberly Valley has just been admitted.
Wonderful. So Kimberly, if you want to unmute yourself and make your public comment, welcome to the meeting.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Okay, so hello, Ukiah trustees. Considering the Hoffman School property, there are a lot of rumors flying around about who is planning to purchase the property. Rumors are common with most highly sensitive public issues. However, one item that is not a rumor is that Gary Breen told me personally the first time I met him that he was working with UUSD to build 100+ apartment units on the Hoffman School property. Whether he was exaggerating or not, that's what he said. And it is that statement and his clearly expressed intentions that have me and the rest of the Hoffman community concerned. We continue to express our concerns and challenge any attempt to build the high density housing on the Hoffman School property. I listened closely to the April 1st presentation by Scott Sheldon and was not comforted at all by his recommendations to build housing. While he proposed other uses, it was obvious that housing was being promoted as the most lucrative option. Please note, we have never been concerned about the possibility of growing cannabis on the school property. That is the one issue on which we all, UUSD and the community, are aligned. Our concerns are about building high density housing on the school lot, since that appears to be how UUSD can get the most value out of the property. The board claims that they have solicited public comment over the last 18 months, but until the April 1st meeting, I was never aware of a meeting to provide input. I object to any assertion that a good faith effort was made to get input from the residents that surround the school property. I think it's easy to claim that the community was officially informed simply because an agenda was posted within the time period required by the Brown Act, but you know that is not truly transparent. The average resident who has no regular business with UUSD would not know to go online and check every board meeting agenda just in case there was an item on which they wanted to comment. In my experience working with public school boards, many matters are voted on and moved forward without the community knowing what is happening, and only once a matter that directly impacts residents is it realized. I think most school boards know this and they take advantage of it, knowing they can push forward their interests. I understand you are trying to make decisions that are in the best interest of your students and the solvency of your district, but destroying a community in the process degrades any school community trust and relations that are important for all parties. With all that said, I know that other options are available for the property like agriculture, charter schools, community center, church. These are all not as lucrative, but they would create a better community and maintain a safe environment for the local residents, particularly the children who use the school property for recreation and social activities. And after all, isn't that the ultimate goal for the kids to use the property? Thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you very much. It was perfect timing. Next, we'll hear from Malia Meyer with Julie Golden on deck.
Malia Meyer is not currently in the waiting room.
Okay, we'll come back and we'll see if she comes back in later. Is Julie Golden there in the waiting room?
She is. I'll be admitting her now.
Wonderful. And then we have Christian Valley on deck. Julie Golden, if you'd like to unmute your phone, and we're ready to hear your public comment.
Hello?
Yes. Is this Julie?
Yes, this is Julie.
Wonderful. We're ready for your 3-minute public comment.
Okay. So this is Julie Golden, a Hoffman business and property owner. Commenting on my own behalf tonight, I'm also the chair and founding member of the Hoffman Municipal Advisory Council, which was approved by the County Board of Supervisors in January of 2016. I'm commenting on item B4 regarding the real property of the Hoffman School that was on your agenda as a closed item and was suddenly removed today. In reviewing UUSD's meeting minutes from December 14th of 2017, the 7-Eleven Advisory Committee reported that they solicited and received community input and considered the factors specified in Education Code Section 17390. By December of 2017, the Hoffman Advisory Council had met 23 times, and at our monthly meetings, we hosted MCOG, Caltrans, PG&E, Mendocino County Building and Planning, various business entities operating in Hoffman, CAL FIRE, Hoffman Fire, and the local Shokawa Tribe board members, to name a few. In the summer of 2018, the Hoffman MAC had placed the Hoffman school status as a standing item on our monthly agenda. Not once did UUSD or any of the 7-Eleven committee members or current UUSD board members or a staff member reach out to our volunteer citizen committee to solicit input before they moved to surplus the Hoffman school site. I believe there have been many serious missteps and errors in the UUSD process, which violates many state codes, namely the Education Code Section 17390. The only time a UUSD board member attended a Hoffman Municipal Advisory meeting was last February when Tyler Nelson attended as a community member. We had 120 community members in attendance, and ironically, Ted Williams, our District 5 supervisor, asked the group if they were opposed to a low-income housing at the Hoffman school site. That really caused an immediate stir, and more than a majority of the community members raised their hand to vote they were opposed to low-income housing at the Hoffman school site. As the chair for that meeting, I was really caught unaware that our county supervisor, our building and planning director, as well as Tyler Nelson, who was in attendance, were fully aware of the fact that UUSD was going forward with the sale of the school site in Hoffman. UUSD's past actions must be scrutinized, exposed, and corrected, and UUSD's future actions on the disposition of the Hoffman school site must welcome and invite community input, follow the CICS and RFP rules and laws, and be transparent to all. I also sent a letter this last April 8th addressed to Deborah Kubin requesting UUSD make available for inspection and copying pursuant to Government Code 6250, the documentation showing Terra Realty advisors had met with the Hoffman Municipal Advisory Council. I also asked for the 7-Eleven committee reports regarding the Hoffman School from 2009 to present. The agendas, minutes, and staff reports regarding the Hoffman School, attendance record summaries for the district for the past 5 years, electronic mail between any agent, employer, officer of the UUSD with any agent, employer, officer of Terra Realty during the years of 2018 through 2020.
Ms. Golden, you're at 3
Any
minutes.
preliminary title report for any property owned by the district and any checklist pursuant to the CICS Act. So basically, at this time, I've only received a curt email response stating that most of the requested documents could be found online, and the rest of the requested material would be sent after the COVID pandemic restrictions were lifted. This is an unacceptable response. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Christian Valle and Aaron Lefevre on deck.
Actually, Christian Valle and Aaron Lefevre both are not currently in the waiting room. The only other person in the waiting room is Beth Salkin.
Okay, but then we will hear from Beth Salkin.
Beth Salkin has been admitted.
Beth, if you'd like to unmute your phone, we're ready to hear your public comment.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Great, thank you. Okay, so in regards to the Hoffman School being turned into low-income housing, has the environmental impact report been done and has it been disclosed to the public? And does Hoffman even have the infrastructure to handle this number of homes being built? And that infrastructure question includes the streets and if they can handle a mass evacuation for a natural disaster. It seems to be a common theme now in California. And can you imagine adding 100 to 200 more cars, depending on the size of the housing development, to a town that only has one main artery in or out? That's something to consider. Clearly, I don't feel you're listening to what the community of Hoffland is saying about the low-income housing being built by continuing to push this through for Gary Breen. There has not been one person in town, aside from Gary, who wants this project done. I recall one of you said you live in Hoffland, and this may not directly impact you, but it will impact you. The rest of you won't be impacted by this decision, so I feel you don't care to hear what majority wants. But ask yourself this: would you want this in your backyard, in your small town? And would you appreciate not being heard? I didn't think so. I spoke with the County of Mendocino Permits departments today and was told every one of Gary's properties, and that's every single one, has had violations. That's clearly showing a pattern. His most recent project was started before obtaining permits. This is not the kind of man that should be allowed to take over possession of a school district-owned property in good faith. Gary seems to think he's above the law, doing what he wants, when he wants, because he has investors with deep pockets. I'm sickened to think the board of elected officials would support this sort of behavior and continue in dealings with this man who's not law-abiding and clearly entitled. Also, is Hoffman Fire prepared for the rise in calls for service and hospital transport for the people needing medical aid? Something to consider again. In closing, Hoffman is not the town for this size project. And that's it.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you.
Has anyone else entered the waiting room?
No one else has currently entered the waiting room.
Okay, in that case, we will go on then to item C6, acceptance of donations. The donations list is Willis and Barbara Knight donated to the Redwood Valley Outdoor Education Project, and T-Mobile donated toward the COVID-19 Child Meal Program. Is there a motion to approve those donations?
I so move.
Trustee Barrett moves.
Second.
Trustee Arkin seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Okay. I thought that I had lost a board member on my screen there for a moment. So, okay. Whew. Now, C7, employee organizations brief reports. I saw Lisa from our CSEA. There you are, Lisa. Would you like to make your report?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Hopefully everyone is healthy and well. The Ukiah, our local chapter awarded 4 scholarships this year. Usually we only do 2. We bumped it up a couple of years ago to 3 this year. We did 4 as we had only 4 people apply. And we felt like we need to give the kids the money because that's what we're here to do, right? Help the kids out. They didn't get to graduate like normal. So we were excited to be able to have the funding to do that. CSEA's governmental relations team has been working tirelessly with the heads of the state of California to try to advocate for funding for schools. And Tony Thurman attended the last board meeting to show his gratitude and solidarity for the 250,000 classified employees during the board directors meeting, the last one we held. And our 94th annual conference is going to be virtual this year. And the theme is Vision for All, and it's the 20th and the 21st. And it's all going to be virtual, so that's going to be interesting. But other than that, that's all we have going on at the moment. We are working with Ukiah Unified and trying to nail down how we're going, how fall is going to look like, how we're going to come back to school and be safe and get our kiddos back in the groove. So thank you for your time and thank you for everything you guys do.
Thank you for your participation in those committees, because those are really key to getting us, back on whatever path we're going to be on in the fall. Next, our Ukiah Teachers Association. I don't see, oh, there's our rep. Okay, Terry.
Hi, everyone. This is Terry DeSilke, President for Ukiah Teachers Association. Yeah, there's a lot going on. I appreciate all of the board members. I know this has got to be a really hard time for you because I know it's a really difficult time for all of us in education. I feel like we're facing everything every day of what we don't know and trying to put things together and make sure that it works for everybody. I appreciate Ava talking about the equity committee. I know that has come up from several members in our association who appreciated Deb asking them to join. I attended my grandson's graduation in Fremont, so I am self-quarantining myself because I went out of my bubble. But it was a wonderful time. It was just a small group, and I'm really glad that I got to see that because it was really something else to see my grandson graduate. Those of you that know me know that that was a real big accomplishment for him. We are working with the district on several committees. We are also, we have a subcommittee going for the changes at the high school for bargaining. I will be attending a virtual president's conference in July for CTA because I'm still president. That wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. So I'm rolling with it. And I appreciate everything you're doing. I know that we can do great things together because we always have. I just want us to keep in mind compassion for our community that I just heard in Hoffman and for everything that's going on because it's just a little bit more intense for everybody. So thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Next, we'll hear from Brian Barrett, who's giving the leadership report this week. And it's just funny, Brian, because the sun must be behind you because we can kind of see a silhouette of you.
I do that on purpose. It's my spy mode.
Okay. All right. Good to know.
President Molgard, members of the board, and Superintendent Cuban. I just have a quick little report. When I first began as a principal, the superintendent who hired me said, I want to give you a little advice to live by. And that advice was give all the credit and take all the blame. And I pretty much have lived those words for the last 20 years or so as an administrator. Tonight, I would like to give some credit for the checking out ceremonies and virtual graduations. First of all, I'd like to show my appreciation to the staffs at the 7 secondary schools. I know at Pomalita, we went first with the checkout process, and it was over 100 degrees that day. It was a Thursday. We even had a teacher go down with heat exhaustion. But it was all a very successful experience for students, families, and our staff. It was long, hot days, 12 to 7 o'clock. But I know the staffs at other schools were equally as impressive because I've heard their principals talk about their staff's ability and the pride in their efforts. And I, on a personal note, watched some of the Ukiah High and thought that was a tremendous job that Ukiah High did. Secondly, I'd like to take a moment and talk about our secondary administrators. There have been a few times in my career that I felt a level of admiration and respect that I felt working through them through this crisis that we're in with COVID-19 and the end of the year ceremonies. The work that was involved was very difficult. The planning for the end of the year ceremonies and development and implementation was a tremendous amount of work. And if you didn't know this, our superintendent, she's going to kill me for saying this, can be very to the point and hold us to high expectations at times. And there was a great amount of pressure placed on Superintendent Cuban working with our county health officer and trying to create the best end of the year experience for our grads. Well, that pressure ran downhill and we were all told, you know, basically don't screw things up, especially the middle schools who were going first. No mistakes were expected to be made. And it was understandable. We didn't want to make a mistake and adversely affect what was going to happen at Ukiah High School. So basically from Deb to the principals, the reaction to the pressure was work hard, get it done. And again, great pride in the experience working with our Superintendent Cuban and the principals in the ceremony process. And as you'll find out later in the meeting when we talk about planning to open the school, what the administrators are doing. They're playing a tremendous important role in the planning process. I think you're aware that UUSD does a great job in crisis mode. We seem to be living from crisis to crisis these days, but our message will prevail. When I see how we assess, plan, and execute with our outstanding staff of classified and teaching staff and our leaders, and we meet with obstacles with triumph, it makes me realize how much pride I have in working with Ukiah Unified. That is giving credit where credit is deserved. And tonight, there's not going to be any blame, just credit. So great job, Ukiah Unified, everyone involved with all of the end of the year things and the crisis that we're going through. And thanks, Deb, for the great leadership.
Well, thank you. Any questions for Principal Barrett? Okay, all right. And we already had our student advisor report. So we'll go now to the 2021 school opening update and board input discussion. We put this early in the agenda in case that there was any public input. So if Ian or Debbie can let me know if there is anybody in the waiting room who comes up, we don't have to take it right now, but if there is anybody who comes in during the presentation, just let us know. So now we'll turn it over to Katie Summer, Assistant Superintendent, and Brian Barrett, I believe. Are you introducing this, Superintendent Cuban?
Just a quick introduction. I talk about giving credit where credit is due. Katie, Assistant Superintendent Summer, and Principal Barrett have been spearheading this effort. We have a lot of staff members involved in various working groups, which they will discuss, but I just wanted to thank both of you so much for your leadership. This is really difficult. These are really difficult times. And having spent our lives planning, to have so many uncertainties and unknowns is especially difficult on on one's psyche. So I just want to thank both of you so much, and thanks to UTA and CSEA for your incredible partnership. We're really lucky, and I agree with Principal Barrett. And I'm sorry I put so much pressure on you, but you did an awesome job. So take it away, Katie.
Okay. Good evening. I'm going to share my screen now. If I have any technical difficulties, Deb's going to chime in here, but I think we're good. Can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect.
Good evening, everyone. Like both Brian and Deb, we've been working very hard on planning for the reopening of school with our CTA and UTA and our CSEA. And tonight we're here to share with you what we've done so far around planning and returning to school, and look forward to sharing this with you and getting input. So our groups have been meeting to plan, and we have some guiding principles. This is a really interesting time in which we're planning because it's has a lot of effect on our whole community. So our guiding principles are: our first priority is to bring students back to school as we traditionally have had school. But we know in this difficult time, we must remain flexible and open to change. And as many of you know, things are even changing today. So that's one of our guiding principles. Another one is that we will practice measures to keep our students and employees safe, that our practice and decisions should not negatively impact the learning of any groups of students, that we need to be thinking about all students, that we'll communicate clearly and often with our groups and stakeholders, and that schools have a responsibility to serve all students no matter the platform of instruction, and again, thinking of all students. And then lastly, that we recognize the responsibility and importance schools have in our community and for our students and families' economic and social emotional health. So that as we're working together, these are the guiding principles we've shared. The next part is just some guidance that we've been using. The state came out with 2 guidance documents that are attached. One from the California Department of Ed, which is called Stronger Together, and the other from the California Department of Public Health. We've reviewed the guidance, and some of the main guidance that has come out from those documents are below. One of the large things is one of the main things is looking at how can we have 6 feet of social distancing in classrooms as much as possible. The other things other aspects and components in the guidance were face coverings for staff and recommended for students, hygiene, hand washing, sanitizing, increasing that, health screening, including checklists and temperature checks, looking at increased disinfection and making sure that ventilation there's as much ventilation as possible. Access to campus, meaning making sure that you're limiting access to campus to students, including limiting volunteers and families, other family members, employee health and safety issues, also guidance on communication and guidance around transportation. And we'll talk a little bit more about that today. But those were some of the main pieces of information that were shared in the guidance. The other components, so we've been reviewing the guidance, using those 2 documents as our major tools. The other piece that we've done in our planning is we've conducted surveys. So we've conducted 4 different surveys. There was during remote learning, about 3 weeks before the end of remote learning, a survey was given out. It was a uniform survey from Hanover Research that was given out to parents, students, and staff. And that was given out to parents, students, and staff. And I'm trying to figure a technical part out here to make my screen a little bit bigger.
If you go down on the right, the little, that right there, that thing, the four mark thing.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that. Sorry, give me 1 second. Why I don't see that.
No, down onto the actual screen.
Yeah.
Or down there, right there. See
Yeah,
that?
I can't see that.
Oh, it's so funny. It's showing up for us, but not for you. Okay.
Hold on. Now I see it. Is my screen larger?
Not really. Oh, well.
Okay, sorry. Ian, do you have any other thoughts on how I can make the screen larger?
Katie, when I go into the view options, this is Deb, it does say that it's on full screen.
Okay. Should I keep going or?
Yes, please.
Okay. So we gave out a survey toward the end of the remote learning to parents, students, and staff. And then right at the end of school, we also surveyed parents on opening and certificated staff and classified staff. And we wanted to share some of that with you today. One of the first questions we had was around busing, and I realize this is out of order, but that's okay, was on busing and how comfortable people feel with students on buses. And you can see on this one that we had about 47% of parents not comfortable with busing, and about, if you go all the way over to the other side, about 25%. So we also have looked at those numbers at different school sites. They vary a little bit differently, but in general, a lot of people are still having some concerns about busing. The first question that we asked parents was around options, and that looking at if we are going to offer options to parents. Do you feel more comfortable sending your student back to campus, or would you prefer remote learning or independent study? And you can see in red, that's the percentage of students that would prefer remote learning or independent study, which was about 28%. And you can see about 72% would prefer to send their students back to school. When we asked a similar question to our certificated staff, with would you prefer all on-site, how comfortable are you, and which would you prefer, all site, all remote instruction, independent study, or I have no preference. You can see that 41% of the teachers said on-site, all on-site, 22% approximately didn't have a preference, and about 21% for independent study and about 15% for all remote. And the difference between those two is independent study is more where it's the traditional model where you would meet with a student once a week and they would have their work for the week. Remote learning is where you're teaching every day, it's just remote. The other question then we asked were around models of opening. And so we asked the question, if we can't open to the more traditional model, we had a couple models we've been looking at. And the three models were, the blue is students attend 2 consecutive days, like Monday and Tuesday, and then they're remote off campus the rest of the time. So that would be where they're consecutive. Model B is where they're 2 alternating days, like a Tuesday, Thursday. And model C is where they attend in the morning or the afternoon session. And so when we looked at parents, they mostly preferred the 2 consecutive days at 44%. And then Model B, which was the alternating, was about 23%. And then the AM/PM was about 33%. We asked certificated staff a similar question, and you can see to be able to cut and paste these into a graph, you have to kind of, it does the shortening, but Model A was the 2 consecutive days, the blue. So about 38% of the staff preferred the consecutive model, 37% the alternate, alternating model, and about 16% the AM/PM model. And then all these other little colors where people had other ideas and comments. And then the classified, we also asked a similar question to the classified. And again, blue you can see is about 39%, which is 2 consecutive days. Model B, which is red, which is 2 alternating days, was about 21%. And Model C, which was AM/PM, 2 shifts on school, was about 29%. So from that data, we've noticed that more people in all the models prefer the 2 consecutive days. The other questions that we put on, another question was just how comfortable are you sending students back to school, just to get kind of how people are feeling. And you can see that it's distributed across 1 being not comfortable, 5 being fully comfortable. And so on 1 and 2, you can see that's a little bit over 30%. So when we looked at that data, we think there are about 30% of the families would prefer remote learning, and that more of a majority would prefer, families would prefer the consecutive days, being at school like on a Monday and a Tuesday. Deb?
Katie, I'm sorry, I was passing you a note earlier, but did you talk about how many parents took this survey? How many students this represents?
So what we asked of parents, we asked that they each fill one out for each student that attends. We have approximately 6,000 students, and we got almost, we got 2,000 survey responses. I think it was 1,980 something. So we got very close to a third of all the students. Thank you, Deb. On the certificated staff, we had about 247 responses. And we have approximately 360 certificated staff. So you can see on the certificated staff around feeling comfortable coming back. On that, it's the same 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And classified staff had a higher rate of 5s around being comfortable coming back to work. So there's people, there are folks that are concerned, but people are starting to feel comfortable too. Okay, so how are we planning? We wanted to just share with you right now. We're in the process of planning for next year. Brian and I worked together on creating 3 committees. So the first committee is the school opening committee. It's composed of administrators, both district and site administrators. We've been meeting, Brian, when did we start meeting? Boy, I think that was in May, early May. And so that committee, we've been looking at guidance that's been coming out prior to the California Department of Ed and California Public Health. There was other guidance coming out. We were looking at other models that schools and other districts were proposing, and we were brainstorming and looking at what were the different components that we would need to look at to open up. The other committee is our collaborative committee for school opening. It's composed of UTA, CSEA teachers and administrators. And this committee we've met 2 times, and we'll be meeting one more time to kind of summarize what all we've done so far around planning. So that's kind of another overarching committee. And then we've created working groups. And the working groups for school opening, they are covering specific topics. And we'll go over what those working groups are and are drafting specific plans around those topics. So the working groups are addressing health and safety as one group, food services, transportation and custodial, scheduling, communication and parent stakeholders, personnel and training, and then a group is looking at the instructional model around what does remote learning look like, what does hybrid learning look like. So those are our working groups. Our timeline is committees and working groups we're meeting. We've met this week and next week. We will be meeting with the district advisory committee, the parents on the district advisory committee, and which also include Title VI parent and DLAC parent. And then we're going to have a final draft recommendation for school opening on June 30th for the public health officer, and Deb will consult with the public health officer around our plan. And then we're hoping to have board approval for reopening no later than July 17th. One of the challenges we've looked at is transportation. And we just wanted to highlight this one because it's a challenge that we want to continue to look at. Is this in the CDE guidance, they really limited the number of students that could be on a bus. The guidance from public health is a little bit different, but we know that busing is a challenge to look at. And you can see that with the CDE recommendations, it would drastically reduce the amount of students that we could transport. So that's another challenge that we're looking at. In looking at opening options, there are 3 major ways to look at opening, or 3 options. One is, really trying to use alternative spaces as much as practicable and open up to on-site program with parent choice for remote learning or independent study. So that's where we would try to get all students back that want to be back on site, using as much space as we can, and then with parent choice for remote learning or independent study. The second option we've been looking at is opening with approximately 50% of the students on campus. And so what that would mean is some type of alternating schedule. And some of the ones that we've looked at are the AM/PM sessions, alternating days, meaning you might, half of the students would go to school Monday and Thursday, half would go Tuesday, Friday, or consecutive days, Monday and Tuesday, and then Thursday and Friday, with days for deep cleaning in between. So this is an option where we're looking at reducing the amount of students by half to allow for more distancing in the classroom. And again, with parent choice for remote learning or independent study. And then the last option is looking at opening with all remote learning or independent study. And we know we may, at some points in time, if the pandemic gets worse, we'll have to pivot to that due to guidance. So those are the three options that we've been looking at, and we're diving into the details around those options. So now we wanted to open that up for questions. We know that was a lot of information, and both Brian and Deb are here too as well.
Katie, I just wanted to add to the board, our CBO, Steve Barrickman, will be talking about this in his budget presentation. Some of these options under the current conditions aren't even possible because we don't have flexibility yet from the state on two key areas. One is on the instructional minutes requirements. The second is there's a cap for school districts on independent study of 10%. There's no flexibility with that yet either. So we were hoping that that would come out with the budget proposal. And although the Senate and Assembly approved the budget, the governor has not signed the budget yet. There's information that there might be some sort of deal that has been reached today, but we just don't know any of that yet. And so we're designing different options and scenarios based on the hope that we have flexibility if needed.
Questions from the board? And this is a great time to raise these questions because we're still a month away from when we're going to be making some final decisions. Trustee Van Sant?
Wait, I'm sorry to interrupt, but could we not share the screen anymore so we can see everybody?
Oh, sorry. Yep. Thank you.
I don't know if I have questions, but a statement yet. I guess one, let me start with, I do have some questions. I read an article that I didn't read very closely, so maybe this was wrong, but it sounded like at least one school district in San Diego was offering all three of those options, and teachers could choose between all three of those options that you presented. I mean, their version of those three options. And I wondered if that was something that you all had considered. It seems complicated, but you're good at planning complicated things. So I just wondered if that was something you thought. And then I have a ton of comments, but I'll start with just a question.
So was your question about teachers choosing those or?
No. So what I thought I had read is that the school district was preparing for an A, B, and C scenario, kind of like you have lined out, and a parent could choose if they wanted their kid on campus. I think they had it 4 days. I think Wednesday was deep cleaning no matter what, right? So a parent could choose 4 days or 2 days or 100% remote learning. Seems hard, but it was just an interesting thought to me because if you have parents choosing B and C, it just reduces the A group overall. So you have smaller class sizes no matter what, but I just didn't know if that was a scenario you were considering.
We have not yet.
Okay.
Definitely with the choice for remote learning or independent study.
Right. It sounds like
all three.
Right. Option C is an option no matter what. That was just sort of a given, right? Is my understanding. Okay.
Trustee Van Sant, do you know what school district that was?
So again, I didn't read the article very closely. Maybe I misunderstood it, but I felt like it was something Cajon or something like that. I'm just making stuff up. San something. It was, so I could be totally wrong, but that's what I believed I read.
Was it El Cajon?
Maybe.
Okay.
Down in San Diego.
All right. Anything else, Superintendent? Trustee Van Sant?
A whole bunch of comments, but if we want to start with questions, we can come back to me with my impassioned comments.
Oh, I don't know. Do we want passion first or later?
I think we should start with the questions, then get to the passion.
Okay. Trustee Fernandez.
I just for clarification question, although I think I know the answer. Deb, the CDE and the California Department of Public Health guidelines, they're both guidelines, correct? And they're not mandates. We don't necessarily have to follow one or the other, or can we choose to follow one like public health and not the CDEs?
It is guidance for sure. And you'll note a volume difference in the two entities. The California Department of Public Health is, I think, approximately 14 pages. CDE is about 62 pages. So we are basing what we're designing off of that guidance. I have shared input with state level people that it's difficult I think the key differences in the two documents, California Department of Public Health, which they're the medical side of the house, they are putting terms like if practicable in their guidance, whereas CDE takes those words out. For example, in the CDPH guidance, it says it talks about facial coverings, and it uses the words if practicable related to students, or it's recommended, I think is the verbiage they use. And then with social distancing, it uses terms like if practicable, whereas the CDE guidance is very clear about social distancing. It doesn't use words like if practicable. And ultimately, I know this has been messy. I mean, it's been hard for us to try to figure out who actually makes this decision. And I think I finally have clarity this week. So I appreciate having clarity about who makes the decision. And it really is our local school board who makes the decision. We will consult with the public health department. I'll consult with our local public health department, but we are to use the CDE and the CDPH as guidance, but they are guidance documents. I don't know if you saw the governor's announcement today about facial coverings, that they are mandated for all except for 2 and under. But the Association of California School Administrators at about 5 o'clock, and I have skimmed this, Megan, so I hate to say this out loud, but there are some asterisks in the Department of Public Health that say childcare and school facilities have flexibility around that. So I haven't read that with detail yet, but I will after this meeting tonight. So it's been very confusing and a completely, very much a moving target and filled with uncertainty. And again, that's why I really appreciate everybody's patience. I was interviewed today by a radio station, and they said, what advice would you give to parents? How could they be supportive? And I said 3 things. 1 is be patient. 2, be flexible. And please make sure we know what your hopes and dreams are for your students for their education next year. Because in all of these options, we are trying to build choice in for parents. So if they're not comfortable bringing their student on campus for a 5-day, if we're able to offer 5 days a week, if they're not comfortable, that we have some options for them through remote learning or independent study.
Trustee Fernandez, continuing?
No, I mean, that was my question. I have some comments too, but I'll wait till after Trustee Van Sant.
Okay. Other questions, Trustee Barrett?
I'm just wondering if Katie and the groups working on this have considered different situations for various grade spans. For instance, putting K3 or K6 back in regular sessions, quotes normal like we used to have, where maybe the secondary schools have a different look.
Yes, we've had conversations about that. How could we, looking at space, how could we bring younger children back to an on-site program safely? So we are looking at the different ways we could bring different grade levels of students back. We'll be meeting tomorrow to share all the work that we've been doing in our subgroups, and that's part of the conversation for tomorrow too.
Yeah.
Other questions? I have a question about the rights of students. So what if we have a rush on plan A, B, or C, and because of our teachers and our staff and safety and everything else, we can't accommodate a parent or a student's first choice? What is our legal obligation to that student?
I don't know. We have not crossed that bridge yet, Deb.
Okay, that's fine.
And I don't have the legal answer, but I think that the legal answer would be that we are definitely obligated to give students, you know, if we offer a 5-day-a-week program, for example, and we are obligated to give I mean, that is the model of the main model that we're used to. I would think we'd be obligated to give all of our students who want that model.
So we might be able to, your guess, but we won't hold you to this. Your guess is that we would be obligated to do as much 5-day-a-week as is requested while that was an option for us, unless we removed that option entirely.
Yes, and if our most frequent number of days that we can get kids on campus safely would be 2 days a week in person and 3 days a week independent study, it would seem to me that if that's that we would want to make sure and give every single student who wanted that the opportunity to have that and not restrict it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, in addition to questions then, any impassioned comments that any board members would like to make? Or actually, let me ask Ian and Debbie Ornelas at this point if there's anyone in the chat room waiting to make a public comment.
There is not currently anyone in the waiting room.
Okay, thank you. Back to the board then.
Shall I carry on?
Please.
So I think I have a lot of thoughts. So, and I'll try to be and I will try not to ramble on too much. But what I wanted to start with is what I've learned in this pandemic so far is that no one knows what they're doing, including the state, including the Department of Public Health, including Department of Education, because this is totally unprecedented territory. So although we have these documents from them that are guidance, they've never done this before. They don't really know what they're doing. And so I think that that's just something to keep in mind, that we're not working with a environment filled with experts who've had a lot of experience with this situation, including ourselves. And I kind of try to keep that in mind. The other thing I'm noticing is a lot of schools are being very cagey about their plans, because I kind of feel this sense of like chicken, like who's going to go first and say what they're doing, because they don't want to be too far out there, and really waiting to find out what other schools are doing, which is probably where everybody is. And I want to challenge us to really be aggressive in thinking about what is the absolute best situation for our kids, which I think is Plan A. And I do think that we could consider in Plan A a model where Wednesday is a cleaning, and even understanding this is a lot of burden on teachers, so like a planning day or whatever, given that some of them will be involved in remote learning, I suppose. So I really, really want us to be really aggressive in figuring out how we could implement Plan A, either a 4 or 5 day model, do all kinds of aggressive cleaning things to make people feel more comfortable if we need to do that, the plastic partitioning things, if that's something that's practical, and just recognize that that is the best educational environment for our kids. And understanding that even though the guidance is around social distancing, we know children won't do it. They just won't do it. And so there's a lot of logic that I think we have to keep in mind. Even though the guidance is saying this, we know children's behavior, we know they're not going to do it. My other thought about Plan B is teachers are still exposed to the same number of kids. So having that 2 day model doesn't actually reduce the exposure that the adults in the room have. They still have the same number of kids. They have 2 days a week, 2 in the other days of the week. So their exposure to students is exactly the same, unless I'm missing something with math here. So I just think that that's important to remember, that the 2 versus the 5 day model doesn't actually protect our adults anymore one way or the other, which I think is important to keep in mind. And in some ways, I know this is probably radical and you're not going to go for it. I almost don't want to propose a Plan B, because I think it's so important that we bring the kids back to school as much as we possibly could. I know it's not a popular opinion, but that is kind of what I'm thinking. And I'll stop there for a moment. I hate Plan B and I hate Plan C. I think we absolutely have to offer Plan C. I think a lot of parents will choose that. But I really want us to be bold and maybe be leaders here. And the very last comment, I'd see you guys all want me to stop talking and so you can talk. I appreciate the surveys. I think it's hard to do surveys at any point in this pandemic because people's opinions change, and what we ask them in June and how they're feeling at the end of, the beginning of August, and they might be like, are you kidding? Take these children back, please, immediately. Or they may be more scared. We don't actually know which way they're going to go, but people's comfort level changes a lot, day by day with this pandemic. So I think it's super important to seek their input, but it's not really reliable at the moment because people feel differently as this pandemic goes on.
Trustee Fernandez?
I agree with a lot of what Trustee Van Sant had to say, but when I think about this, I keep thinking to myself, whatever decision we make for the fall is probably the decision we're going to stick to until there's a vaccine. So that could be 1 year, that could be 2 years. It's not just a quarter, it's a really long period of time. So I keep thinking about that as what's going to happen to these kids if they only, rather than 180 days of school, they only go 2 days a week. And so they would only have 72 days of in-class instruction as opposed to 180, and what that would be like for the students. I think about the meals they would not be getting every day, and I think about how difficult it'd be for working parents. And I wonder what, if we did 5 days a week, I wonder what accommodations we could make. Like Megan said, could we, rather than 6 feet, could we have 3 feet or 4 feet between desks? Could we have those plastic partitions? Could we figure out lunch not being in the cafeteria or staggering lunch, no assemblies? Could we have fewer classes on the playground? Are there different ways that accommodations we can make and still have everyone there? And then I think the most important thing is, I disagree a little bit with Trustee Van Sant because I think the parents' input is really, really important. And I think if we were to ask them specifically, I know we asked them a couple questions, but it wasn't specific about 5 days a week versus 2 days a week. If we asked them and we said, how do you feel about your child coming back to school 5 days a week with these specific accommodations, not saying following the guidelines, but saying we could only have 3 feet of social distancing or whatever it would be, or would you prefer 2 days a week with the 6 feet of spacing? I would be really curious what parents say, because ultimately, whatever model we choose has to work for our parents and our families, because I feel strongly going back to school 5 days a week, but if the parents don't feel that way, then I think we need to listen to what their desires are, since it's their children, and that would make it work. So I agree. My personal preference would be to find a way to make 5 days a week work for all our students, but I will be on board with whatever the recommendation ends up being.
Thank you. Trustee Arkin?
Yes, it's hard to disagree with Megan and Zoe. I do agree with most of what they've said. I too feel strongly that I'd love to have the kids go 5 days a week. Where I sort of disagree is, for me, it was very helpful. This survey, I was pleasantly surprised to see at this point, with all the hoopla in relationship, hysteria, whatever, about this, the COVID-19, that parents were, a large percentage of parents, more than I would have thought, are willing to have their kids go to school. They're ready for that. And more so on the yes, go to school, than no, let's keep them home and teach them independently and stuff. So that to me was very helpful. I do think it might be a good idea to ask parents about five days a week, but Megan is right that right now, what might go fine now might not go fine in another month. Things are moving fast and kind of crazy, and you keep hearing a lot of different points of view from all the different experts, and they can fight each other with all that. And we do have to come down to some kind of decisions with all the things that all of you that the administrators are bringing down with Deb. And so I think it's important to, I think that once we start making a decision and go forward as time goes on, I think it's going to be much easier to move forward. I think people will be more comfortable. And if not, by the time we're ready to go, I guess, I don't know what we'll do, but I do want to move forward in the sense of having our kids in school. And thank you. For me, it was very helpful, this survey, to see. I was pleasantly surprised. I was also concerned about teachers, you know, how they felt about it, because, you know, some of them having all these kids, and they really have stepped up and classified. It was nice to see. Thank you.
Good. Trustee Diaz?
Yes, I would love to see that the school district is able to bring children to 5 days a week of classroom instruction, with also not doing deep cleaning just on one day, Wednesday, but daily, you know, explore those possibilities of what could we do to actually do, keep the sites sanitized on a daily basis. I know it may be a tremendous effort, but I wonder if parents, after experiencing having their children at home all this time, if they would be willing to volunteer, you know, helping the school, of their children, keeping it safe.
Superintendent Cuban?
Just a clarification, 2 clarifications. One is the reason for the 2 days a week is cutting the school in half would be able to allow us to get closer to the social distancing that's in the guidelines. So that's why we would get only 50% of the students on campus. I also wanted to clarify that the deep cleaning, we are definitely planning for daily sanitization of the schools. And Gabe's been working on getting all the required materials for that. So that is a given. We didn't put it in the materials, but we will definitely be doing that. It just 1 day a week, we would do incredibly deep cleaning of the school. So I just wanted to clarify, Trustee Diaz, that we are talking definitely about daily extra cleaning.
Deb, I understand that the 2 days a week was to achieve this guidance around social distancing, but what I keep wanting to repeat is that children don't behave like adults, and saying that there is 16 kids in a classroom, it doesn't matter. They're still going to be hugging each other in the hallway. They're still going to be making out in the bathroom. It doesn't matter with kids whether it's just a very, very different cultural setting, as you know way better than I do. So to me, again, that goes back to the logic of it and whether it actually makes sense for children in a school environment to think that having less kids in the classroom actually keeps them apart from each other. I really don't think it will. I mean, it definitely won't for like little kids, and it won't for teenagers. They're not going to do it. So that's where I'm just, the other thing I wanted to point out is I follow like news articles, particularly the ones that I want to read, about how things are going on in Europe with schools opening. And the data looks like that schools opening are not creating big outbreaks. So I just feel like we have to not only rely on the experts, but also rely on our own common sense and our own research and our own knowledge while we make decisions that's best for our community, and then communicate really well. I think that's going to be super key to our community about how we've thought through this process and what steps we are taking. Especially if we're going to go with option A, the communication to our community is going to be critical so that we are able to have the faith in our community that we've actually thought this through and still think that option A is safe.
Right, and you'll note that one of the working groups is the communication working group for that exact reason. Everybody's been saying this, but it's hard to make a decision when you're flying the plane. It's the science. We're learning more and more and more. We don't even know how much of a viral load it takes for a child to be able to transmit the virus to somebody else. We don't even know that kind of stuff yet. So, I agree with Trustee Fernandez, who said whatever we do is probably going to be for the year. But if something dramatic happens and we really gain some new scientific knowledge that makes sense to make a change, maybe at that point we could make a change. For example, the deep cleaning. I wonder, is that necessary, or is that in order to make parents feel better, when in fact what's needed is just the daily sanitation that we're doing every day? And I would want to know what's needed between those two, because if we're talking about an AM PM and we're trying to keep those two groups separate so that they're not sharing, you know, virus particles with each other, then wouldn't we need to be cleaning in between them? And if so, is that possible? How many janitors can you have all at once cleaning a school for an hour? So I don't know. I would just want to rely on some science and what we've learned, and what the public health officer can offer us to see if that can help us make these decisions in a logical way.
One inconsistency I'll point out is that I do know our public health officer has said that the temperature taking doesn't really even make any sense. Like, it's not even really recommended anymore. I think that's an example of helping people feel better by saying we're taking temperatures every day, but it may not be relevant. But if we need to do it to make people feel good, that would be important. I get my temperature checked every day at my workplace. It takes like 2 seconds. It's actually really efficient. So with those things that you shoot at your forehead. But if it makes people feel better, it's worth it to me.
Mm-hmm. Also, is there a group that is specifically working on our plans when there is a positive test by either a child or a staff or a teacher? Is that a separate group, or is that within the other working groups?
Yes, that's in the health and safety committee.
Okay.
And President Mulgard, it's a question that I sent to Public Health today to see if they had any guidance for us on that. We had a discussion as a superintendent's group today about that topic as well. So we'd like to get some protocols crafted around that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you shut down and isolate for a while, do those kids switch to remote learning? Do we have substitutes? If you know, oh my goodness gracious. Yeah, lots of questions.
And you know, part of the planning is looking at these three different, we know we need to be fluid between these, you know, if we have to close school, to hybrid, to back at school. So we're really looking at hashing out all three of those models, because we may have to move between them throughout the year as well.
Mm-hmm. And I asked this question at our last meeting, and maybe it'll come up in the budget discussion that we're having later, but I hope that the working groups are looking at what money it's going to take to really be successful to do this. And if that means having to borrow money from next year, then maybe that's something the board needs to look at. But thinking that we can accomplish all of this planning without spending any money is, I think, pretty unrealistic. But yet, if we don't plan well enough, then it'll be a wasted year for the kids. So anyway, I just hope people aren't trying to think they can get all this work done for no money.
We are definitely not thinking that.
Good, good. Other comments from board members? Yes, Trustee Barrett.
I would just like to weigh in with what the rest have said. I think that we need to get as many kids as possible back in school for full days. If we need to have another day of cleaning, maybe we could have kids go 4 days and clean on Wednesday. That wasn't my idea, but somebody else that's on one of these committees. Anyway, I think there are real positive ways to look at this. If we have 30% of the parents who choose to do remote anyway, we're going to have quite a few less students. And so, I mean, on a daily basis, we'd have 2/3 of the kids there. Maybe we could, like Zoe mentioned, work out 4 feet of distancing or something like that. But we all know, I agree with Megan totally, the kids are not going to distance. There's no way. You can put them 8 feet, 10 feet away in the classroom. The minute they get a chance, they're going to be together again. So
totally agree. And I think it's incumbent on us to keep reminding the world of that. I mean, people who don't deal with children all day long don't think about that kind of thing. And they
Right.
just are stuck in the social, I mean, you know, older people or whatever, they're not thinking the way that you all about child behavior. And I think we have to keep reminding that. They're, you know, even if they're going to be in sports teams, they're going to be they're going to go home and fraternize with their sibling who's in a totally different social group. Like there's no logic to trying to control children's behavior the same way you can with maybe a couple or a single elderly person who really could literally limit their contact. They actually do have that option in their lives. It's not going to work with children.
Yeah.
Anything else from the board for this discussion?
I'm sorry, I've been talking a lot, but I do want to say I appreciate all it's nice to see that presentation with the work groups you have and the subjects that you have in place. You're really clearly thought through how to do this, and I'm really impressed with that because it just seems like a really intense planning endeavor. And I know you all are tired and you're still doing it, and you're doing it really well. So thank you for that work. I can tell it's super intense and you don't have much time to figure it out, and you have a lot of people's opinions. And it's super high stakes. This is really high stakes work. So thank you for that.
Trustee Nelson?
Yeah, here for all the hard work. You guys I do not envy you right now, but I really appreciate what you're doing. The one thing that I want to add to the conversation is I think it's really important to remember the science. I would say I agree with the group that social distancing is kind of a joke when the kids get together. But we know that is supposedly works. We also know that masks work. So as we're going through this planning process, I really hope we don't forget to look at the best science that we have. I agree, Megan. I don't think the folks really know what's going on either. I keep looking at the documents for our business and the school stuff, and there are a lot of, if you can do this, if you can do this. So it's, that part is a little scary, but we do know, we kind of know what's going on with the science, and that social distancing and the masks are supposed to work. So I hope we don't lose sight of that in our excitement to get kids out of my house. I mean, back to school.
Thank you, Trustee Nelson. Let's go to our waiting room now. We have a public comment.
Yes, we have Gabriel Bacameza in the waiting room. I'm letting him now.
Wonderful. Great, Gabriel, if you could unmute, we're ready for your public comment.
He should be unmuted now.
He is unmuted. Unfortunately, we can hear his YouTube in the background.
Thank you, Trustee Nelson. Let's go. Now we have a public comment.
Hello, can you hear me?
Gabriel, we can hear you, but we can also hear the echo of the YouTube video. So if there's any way for you to turn that volume down.
Okay, I have muted the video, so hopefully you guys can only hear me now.
Perfect.
Thank you. I'll say this quickly. We have struggled here at our house. We have 2 kids, a kindergarten kid and then a high schooler, and it's been tough for both of them with just the independent studying. As studies have shown nationwide, it's just not the same, and students do not retain the same information or as engaged as they would inside of a classroom. And as Megan Van Sant was saying earlier, studies in Europe have shown that strict measures and complying with them can help prevent a huge spike in cases of the coronavirus. So I understand also parents want to have their kids go back to school so that they can have a much normal pace of life and not be constantly stressed and trying to balance work and having kids at home. So it's a tough decision for anyone, as Tyler mentioned. I would not envy being in that position, but I think it has to be said then that if students are going to go back to school, it should be maybe trying to still keep that social distancing, those 6 feet. It's hard with the younger ones, for sure, but any effort that can be made to have them observe it will greatly reduce any potential spikes in new cases which will overall help us. And if the district does decide that it can take those strict steps to reduce a huge spike, then I do wish the district the best of luck in having that be the case. And if that doesn't work out, if that doesn't seem like it's the best plan, then I totally advocate for remote learning, because as I said, independent studying, it's not really working out for us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Gabriel.
Mm-hmm.
Any other public comments? Okay, hearing none. Have we provided enough feedback from the board, Katie? Hopefully not too much.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. We look forward to your presentation in July. Our next agenda. I'm sorry?
Can I ask something? A clarification?
Please.
So are the next steps, they're going to continue meeting, and then are they going to bring, is administration going to bring a plan to us to approve?
Yes, so they're going to continue to meet all those different work groups. A draft of the plan will go to the public health officer to see if she has any comments or recommendations, and then it will come back for approval to this board on June 16th, July 16th.
We will be working with the board to schedule a special board meeting that week of July 12th, 13th.
Okay, it might not be on the Thursday night. Okay.
Yeah. So we will work with the board to find a date that week so that we can get moving. And if I can get feedback earlier than that, we may be meeting the week before. So we'll work on that, President Mulgard.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so moving on then to our next educational program item, D2, discussion and approval of the 2023 strategic plan with college and career readiness, positive culture, and equity as UUSD's 3 goals.
Thank you, President Mulgard. You all have, we've had lots of conversation about this agenda item. I'm really grateful to all of the work that our steering committee did way back in November, which seems like years ago at this point. They came up with 3 different goals for us. We started presenting those goals to the board in January. One is around college and career readiness, the other is around positive culture, and the third is around equity in our district. So our plan, so we've been bringing this to the board since January and February. Our plan actually on the equity goal was to get our task force started. So that the one action item in there right now is to form an equity task force to examine data and look at systems in our district and come up with recommendations for the board by December of 2020. Our plan was to actually form that task force in April. And at least have a couple of meetings to get that work started. And obviously we know what has happened since April. So we are currently seeking members of that committee. And I sent a communication out to parents today. Our plan is to start gathering that task force together, identifying who those people will be. And then Hanover Research will be working with us on this task. They are great looking at data. They'll be working with us on facilitating and doing the workshops around this. We met with them this week to talk about a timeline for this work, and they actually recently facilitated a virtual workshop in this area. They definitely prefer something in person, which this is highly sensitive work and it's so much better in person, but we also don't want to wait too long. So we will be forming this task force. All of the other documents that are attached, you have seen. We've got our 2-page focus document that you've been using to make budget decisions on. We have a very simple budget document that you've given us input on that incorporates all of the reductions that were made in June as well. And there is a 3rd document attached that's a very brief summary of the areas that we're going to be working on next year. So although we know that things are incredibly uncertain, we don't know what the budget is going to look like, we're asking for the board to approve these documents, knowing that we may have to change them next year. But we really want to honor all the work that has been put into our strategic plan redesign. And so we've got this on the agenda for board approval tonight, knowing that it may change in the future.
Board members, do you have any questions or comments about any of the 3 documents? Ian, is there anyone in public comment?
There is not.
Thank you so much. Trustee Fernandez?
Are you looking for the 2 board members to be on that committee tonight?
We would like to have 2 board members serve on that task force, and we're open to, as we do every December, we look at committee representation, but it's not December, but we would like to get this committee formed. And so we would love to have 2 board members partner with us on this task force.
Okay, I wasn't volunteering, I was just clarifying.
Thank you for bringing that up. We appreciate that. And we would like to identify those 2 board members tonight if possible. And as we roll into August with the formation of this committee, you would be included in that.
So would anyone else like to volunteer to be on that committee? Anybody?
I did not volunteer, Ms. Mulgard.
No. I was saying anybody else because I already saw a hand by a board member. So I was just looking for other volunteers.
I actually had a question, but I do want to volunteer, but do you want to go to Trustee Diaz first, or?
Yes, because I just saw his hand go
Okay.
up. Trustee Diaz?
I'd like to volunteer.
We would love for you to be on that committee. Thank you. Trustee Van Sant?
I'd like to volunteer too, but I don't, if there's other people we can, I don't know, roll the dice or something. I would like to be on the committee as well. But I did, you may have said this, Superintendent Cuban, and I wasn't listening. Do we know what the, how many meetings are going to be or what the frequency of meetings are yet? Or maybe we don't know that yet.
We're working that up right now. We definitely know that we will be doing a workshop with the committee members to set the context, make sure everybody has the same understanding of what equity means and all of that. There will be a survey of all the task force members before the workshop happens, so they can tailor the workshop toward the knowledge of the staff members or the task force. And so there will be at least, and it depends on if it's going to be virtual or in person. My hope is that we can socially distance and be in person in a large area, because this type of topic is much better in person for relationship building. So if it's virtual when we do the workshop, it'll be staggered. If it's the workshop itself will be at least a day, maybe a 2-day workshop, and then there will be follow-up meetings afterwards. Our goal is to get an overall district plan and to have school site plans. So we're going to be asking the principals to be on this group, as well as a classified employee, a certificated employee, and a parent representative from each school site, and some additional members as well.
This is going to be enormous.
It will be a large task force. They will be breaking up into subcommittees, though.
Okay. Any other comments? All right, well then we have our 2 volunteers for the Equity Committee, Trustee Diaz and Trustee Van Sant. Wonderful.
And I really want to be on this committee, but I also have a lot of work obligations. So if it turns out that I can't, maybe President Mulgard, you can find a backup form at that time. But let me find out more about the schedule, because it's super important work to me and I desperately want to do it, but I just am leaving that opening.
Okay, I understand. Okay, at this point, then I would entertain a motion to approve the 2023 strategic plan documents as attached.
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Just to assure the public that we've seen these many, many times, so we're not just approving these without lots of discussion. Well, it just seems so odd. It's such an important set of documents that we don't rehash again, but it's only because we have hashed and rehashed ad nauseum.
I concur. I feel like I was like, oh yeah, that I've seen that. We've seen it a lot.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the 2023 strategic plan documents as presented, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so passed. Thank you for all the hard work to staff and the parents and community members who worked on these documents. Thank you. We're going to take a 5-minute break now, and then we will come back for operational systems. So it is 8:10. Let's be back. On my computer, it says 8:10, so let's come back at 8:15. Thank you.
We are currently on break.
Don't fall asleep, Carolyn. You're muted.
There, I unmuted.
There you go.
Oh, how have you been?
Good. Really, really busy, but good. Things are growing fast, and we just opened the tasting room yesterday. Today, I don't even know anymore. We just opened the tasting room recently, so that's kind of nerve-wracking and exciting. Just all the safety stuff. It's like we want to do it right, so.
Did you have
just letting you all know, board, we're live streaming still.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Anyways, I'm doing really well. How are you guys doing?
We're doing well also. Yeah.
Good.
Just quiet.
To our June 18th Ukiah Unified Regular School Board meeting. Thank you for your attention. We are now moving on to our agenda item E, operational systems. With the board's indulgence, I'd like to take item E2 first for unrelated reasons, which is the first of a three-part process that we have to do for this easement. So there is no vote tonight, but it is a great opportunity to ask lots of questions that we can come back with the next time that we'll be doing it. I thought we didn't have a vote, but then when I look at the board thing, it does say approval of the resolution regarding intent to convey. So I'm sure that Gabe Sherman, who is presenting this, will explain to us that it's a three-parter. Gabe?
Yeah, so as the board may recall, we've done this actually twice before in recent years. We did a easement for the city electric at Oak Manor, and then again at Nokomis for the electrical line along the side of the school. By ed code, we do have to do a resolution to start with. The second portion will be advertising this, and then there'll be a public hearing at the next scheduled board meeting. The easement in question in this case is specifically for our maintenance, operation, and transportation bus yard. It's in support of a California Energy Commission grant that was board approved and that we were awarded. If you recall, we were awarded 6 electric buses. We currently have 3 down there in operation, and our electrical facility down there is not sufficient to maintain that level of charge. So those are very large buses, very large batteries. So in effect, one portion of that grant, in addition to the 6 buses, is we've been awarded $360,000 worth of infrastructure upgrade. So what this portion does is we're going to have to install a brand new electrical service, basically an industrial grade electrical service, a 3-phase service. There'll be a new pole set down there and a transformer. And what this eases will do is it'll allow the electrical utility to access the site, install the equipment, and then service the equipment. Typically, it's a 5 to 10 foot easement around the area of installation, and then allows the crews access and egress. Any questions?
And just so to clarify, President Mulgard, this action is to, if you pass this resolution, it's just regarding our intent to convey a transportation easement. This in the next meeting that we have, you'll actually hold a public hearing regarding this matter, and at a third meeting, you can approve it. So it does, this particular action takes 3 meetings.
So we are just looking for a resolution regarding our intent to convey.
Correct.
Trustee Nelson.
Gabe, how long do it, once the project actually, once ground is broken, how long do you think the project is going to take to do the service upgrade?
Fairly quickly, actually. The bulk of the project is actually going to be it will not involve the city itself. It'll be the additional electrical infrastructure. So it'll be the service, the pole will be set, the electrical service will be placed, and then we're going to have a whole, we're actually have a project that's in development. We're pretty much ready to go out to bid. And that will be a new lines going throughout the MOT yard, additional chargers, including potentially a level 3 charger. So the big DC fast chargers. Our current infrastructure with the 3 buses we have, it allows full charge for the buses from 0 all the way up in about 5 to 6 hours. So what we're finding with some of our buses is they'll go out around in the morning and they come back, and by the time they're ready to go to the second route, they're not fully charged. So what this will do is to allow us to have all of our charging systems are going to be those high-end level 2s. They're going to have about twice the charge rate, so they'll charge in 3 hours. And then that level 3 is going to be the first one in the district, and one of the first in actually any school district in California. And those will allow for almost a 1-hour charge. That's kind of the next step to allowing school buses, electric school buses, to do field trips. In the future, we're going to need these at our high schools if we want to use our electric buses for field trips. And it's really one of the next legs to promoting or pushing EVs throughout school districts. So it's an exciting grant. It's an exciting opportunity for us. And we have been working with the city on our city electric department is fantastic. We're really lucky to have a municipal department that works with us to this level. They're throwing a lot of, they are working with us and giving us some good costs on this. And then also they're throwing us some extra grant funds to offset some of the chargers, which allows us to do a little bit more in the infrastructure and really future-proof it. So that, in the future, be it 5 or 10 years from now, we can expand our fleet again.
Cool, thank you.
Is this similar to the technology they have at the MTA lot at the south end of town for their electric buses?
Yes, although, with this, with any new technology and electric vehicles are amongst those as a solar. I mean, the technology is progressing so fast. Every 6 months or year, you're getting a new generation. So this is really, particularly these level 3 chargers, which again we're looking at potentially putting one in. There's not many of them installed in the U.S. And so this is kind of more in line of what you see in the Tesla chargers, although they're like kind of Teslas on steroids. Because again, our buses, the battery banks are a lot larger than a Tesla vehicle.
A little bit bigger than a Tesla.
A little bit. They are used in Canada and Europe. So it's a proven technology.
Oh, good. So it's not on the bleeding edge.
Right. Well, the U.S. tends to lag a little bit on this type of technology. So.
Right.
But with these 9 buses, what that'll mean is of our operational fleet, which currently, and it's not because of our choosing, but because of staffing levels, that'll be over 3/4 of our fleet will be electric. Our nominal fleet will almost put at 50%. And I'm not aware of any other school districts in California that have that level of electric vehicle to diesel or conventional in their fleet. So kind of exciting for us. And it does have an impact on our bottom line as well, because again, given the rates, the electrical rates in the city of Ukiah, charging those buses is very cheap compared to diesel, even with the low rates of the diesel right now.
One board member had a question about whether or not this easement was bigger than it needed to be, or is it just enough so that we can get our work done? We were afraid that we might accidentally, now that we see the map, it's different, but that we might accidentally be ceding too much property as an easement.
No, it's again, the way the easements are crafted, it's for the actual installed switchgear and pole, and it's typically about a 5 foot around them. So we're just going to be mirroring the language that we've used before, and obviously we will run that through council as we have in the past. I don't. It's a very small portion in a corner of the transportation yard, and I don't believe that there's any jeopardy there.
Okay. Okay, great. Good to know. Good to know. Other questions from the board? Okay, then we'd be looking for a motion to approve this resolution intent to go out.
I so move.
Okay. Was there a second? I didn't hear that.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Trustee Fernandez. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. And Ian, we'll just assume that if there is anybody in public comment, you're going to let us know, because I'm forgetting to ask you every time.
No problem, I will.
All right, thank you. And there's nobody there now?
No, there is not.
All right, then we will go on. Thank you, Gabe. Thanks for sticking around and answering our questions. We'll now go to the public hearing on our proposed budget for adoption and approval of the 2021 fiscal year.
Okay, good evening. I'd like to go ahead and share my screen if we're ready. We'll get this started.
Sure.
Okay, can everybody see it okay?
Yes.
Great. All right, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the work of the entire fiscal team. This is one of our bigger undertakings of the year, especially Lynn and Chelsea and most of all, Christy. It's definitely a labor of love to get us to a budget to start the year, and even more so with all of the uncertainty and challenges of this year that we'll talk about in great detail here. I'd also like to acknowledge all the site secretaries and the principals and the departmental secretaries and departmental heads and the folks in charge of different categorical programs. They all have a piece in this. They have to sit down with us, kind of go through how we're going to finish 1920, how we're going to spend the 2021 funds. And again, with all the uncertainty, it makes it a little more challenging, and we appreciate all of their time and energy. And also I'd like to thank the board. We've had to drag you into a couple extra meetings the last half of May to help us deal with some of the things we've been thrown at by the state and cabinet. The leadership and the support cabinet has provided during all this has been tremendous. I just wanted to really thank everyone. It's definitely a group effort. With that, it's been a busy 5 weeks since the May revision came out. In response to COVID-19 and the sharp downturn in the economy, the governor proposed substantial, really damaging cuts to education budget. A net 7.92 reduction to the local control funding formula, which is 85% of our revenues. Reductions to many key programs, including ACEs and adult education, and a series of accounting, what we'll call tricks, where they're going to basically defer giving money to us to keep them solvent and shift that burden to us, and that's okay, we'll make it work. So once that came out, the state legislature began their deliberations. They created a proposal that eliminates the negative COLA to the LCFF, and they reversed many of the proposed cuts to the other programs, which all sounds great. Except, and you'll notice that I changed the heading there from being, it's been a busy 5 weeks question mark, because with all the motion, there really hasn't been a lot of progress, at least not that we've been able to see. Typically, the legislature would be working with the governor and working to reach an agreement on a budget so the governor could pretty much just rubber stamp it. Well, that's not what happened this time. The legislature met their legal commitment to have a budget that they approved by June 15th, but to the best of our knowledge, the governor has not weighed in on it. They have not tried to bridge the gap between their two budgets, which are very different. Sounds like there may have been a little motion or progress late today. I have not even seen or heard that yet. Hopefully that's good news. But all we really know right now is that the state budget that the governor proposed in May isn't what we're going to get. And it's not going to be what the legislature gave us on Monday. So somewhere in between those two, hopefully, is where we'll land. And again, we don't really know. So our season of uncertainty And the lack of clear direction for us continues, at least until June 30th, when the governor has to sign something. And that's 12 days after we adopt this tonight. So what do the competing proposals really mean for us? Well, so the May revision, as you'll recall, had the 2.31% COLA, but then a 10% reduction, meaning a negative 7.92% COLA overall. The legislature's budget restores that 2.31% COLA, does not make a reduction, meaning we'll get that full 2.31%. What does that mean for us? Well, you can see in the second part of the grid here, what it does to our base grant, our supplemental and concentration grant, and our transportation funds. All told, that's a $6.5 million difference between those two proposals just for our district. Now, when you realize there's 1,000 districts in the state, some much larger than us, some much smaller, there's a lot of money that has to be moved around and settled here at some point pretty soon. On the categoricals, the governor had proposed no COLA and reductions from 15 to 50%. The legislature is saying, give the COLA and don't make any reductions. Okay, well, that's great. So which one is it? Pick one or pick something and let us know. So in the meantime, we just have to kind of charge forward and make our best assumptions and best decisions. So as you know, we spend a lot of time talking about what are we going to do in response to this? If we really do lose out on $6.5 million in revenue, what do we do in 2021? Not much time to respond from middle of May or the end of June until the school year starts pretty much July 1st in terms of how we're going to make all those reductions. So we've been using the strategic plan, that 2-page document, to guide a lot of our spending decisions and set a lot of our priorities. We prioritize staffing to include filling all vacancies for general education and special education teachers, for technology support positions, positions that support health and school sanitation, and positions that support social and emotional well-being. Other positions, unless they're legally mandated, will remain vacant if they come open. And we will not fill any vacant administrator positions. One of the big hits you saw on the previous slide was a reduction to supplemental and concentration. Well, so last time we met, we talked about how are we going to reduce our SCG spending. You gave us direction and we have made those reductions. The adult education program, they've worked to reduce their budget. And then, as we've talked or alluded to earlier tonight, there are some one-time federal funds available to pay for some of the pandemic-related expenses. So far, our preliminary allocation is $1.4 million. We should have received that by now theoretically, but we have not received the money yet. So until we get it, I don't believe we're actually going to get that much. I'm just being a little skeptical. How we can spend that money kind of follows lots of different things that we can use to address the pandemic, whether it's cleaning materials, safety materials, training, PD to support remote-based learning, instructional materials, technology, all sorts of things. So we do have a pot of money that we have not budgeted yet that will definitely help us address the pandemic once we understand how we're going to move forward. We hope to have that budget kind of nailed down by the end of June. Again, it kind of depends on what plan we pick and how we're going to go forward. But so we're trying to keep up, but we'll definitely get there at some point. Another part of the UUSD plan was some accounting changes of our own. We are not going to make contributions to certain programs in 2020, 2021, including $300,000 to deferred maintenance, $442,500 to textbook adoption, and $100,000 to safety equipment and vehicle replacement. We're also going to borrow district reserves that we have set aside over the years for deferred maintenance, $186,000, for facilities, $793,000, and for textbook adoption, almost $2.7 million. So we've had those reserves that we've built up over the years wisely and smartly. Now we're going to borrow them to help us weather this first year of the storm, assuming these reductions really do hit as part of the budget. Looking briefly at 2019-20, obviously every dollar we save in 2019-20 helps us in the multi-year projections and helps us weather the storm. You'll see that we thought we would end 2019-20 with a little bit over a 9% reserve at second interim. Now we've revised those budgets and we're up over 11%, almost over 11.5%. It remains to be seen how the books will actually close. I think it will be somewhere around that 11.5%, perhaps even a little bit better. We've really slowed down our spending since March, since this all hit. We've been very strategic in what we spent and what we have not spent, knowing that this crisis was coming. One piece we do need a little bit of direction on is we did not spend all of the SCG funds from last year, from 2019-20. We would have probably spent all of them or most of them had the year continued as normal, had we been able to do all the PD and buy all the things we would have bought in the last third of the year. But with the spending freeze and with the switch to remote-based learning, we didn't spend a lot of that money. So of that 1.5 million in estimated carryover, we do need 112,000 to help us balance the 2021 expenditures based on the current revenue assumptions. We'd already earmarked 400,000 for Chromebooks. We had done that several meetings ago. We had talked about 200,000 for textbook adoptions. We'd also like to set aside another 200,000 for the equity work that we talked about a few minutes ago. That's going to cost some money. Like to use some of those SCG carryover funds to fund that. And then remote learning support. Again, I'm not quite sure what we're going to need or how we're going to do it, but we're going to need some professional development. We're going to need some hourly pay to supplement the program development. We're going to need instructional materials, and we're going to need technology. And yes, we'll use those federal one-time dollars, but we may need some of these funds as well. And if not, if there's anything left at the end of 2020-21 with this carryover money, we can definitely use it to help us in 21-22 and 22-23 if we need to. Okay, moving into the 2021 budget and the multi-year projections, it is based on the governor's May revision, those severe ongoing reductions to revenues. That's how we built our budget so far. We assumed a normal school year, 180 days of kids in seats. Again, we don't know any different until we know different. There are no formula-driven salary increases at this time because, again, with the reduction in revenue, the formula theoretically would not be triggered. The one piece of good news in the governor's budget proposal was reducing the STRS and PERS contribution rates. Those are included in the budget. Other expenses, except for the board-approved SCG reductions, are fully budgeted at this time. And clearly, using this kind of approach, reductions will be needed in 2021-22 and beyond. So the first slide shows the unrestricted general fund and what our revenues look like. And you can see that big drop from 65.8 million 2019-20 down to 60.3 million in 2020-21. And then revenues are pretty flat at that point. That's all that.
Steve, is this based on the governor's version?
Yes, we're based on the May revised from the governor.
Okay.
Because that's the last official thing we had heard. The legislature's announcement came out on Monday. It was too late for us to adjust the budget, and it's not final anyway. So moving on to expenditures, you see looking at salaries and benefits, 47.8 million in 2019-20, up to 48.9 million in 2020-21. That includes step and column increases and assumes we do fill all of the vacancies that we described earlier. All the positions that affect direct classroom instruction and safety and sanitation for kids. The other expenses are kind of in line with what they were last year. Some of the other assumptions of reductions or increases are documented in the budget book, but by and large, they're pretty flat. You kind of see our total expenditures are projected to go up for 2020-21 over this year. But again, that's just a point in time budget. Other financing sources and uses. For 19-20, we will have to make a little transfer out to the adult education program. And we'll have to make a small contribution to Title I. Then the other contributions you see there, the typical contributions to LEA Medi-Cal, to special ed, to routine restricted maintenance. And then the transfers out we made this year to deferred maintenance, textbook adoptions, and safety equipment. For 2021, you see that we'll be bringing some money in from Fund 17, and that transfers in line. A small transfer out again to adult education. You see LEA Medi-Cal, special ed and routine restricted maintenance again. Then you see the money coming back in from deferred maintenance, facilities, and textbook adoptions like we talked about earlier. Moving on to the recap for the unrestricted general fund. Again, without making any reductions, you see by the end of 21-22, we have a problem. And 22-23, it's much, much worse. Well, we have not made any reductions to the 21-22 or 22-23 budgets yet, so this makes sense. What kind of reductions do we need? Let's look at the next slide. We would need reductions of roughly 3.9 million in 21-22 to keep our 9% reserve, again, based on our budget assumptions today. And we would need reductions of 2.4 million in 22-23 on top of that to maintain our 3% reserve and another 4.3% to get back to that 9% reserve. So if the final budget looks like the May revision, when it's adopted later on this month, we need to get to work on 21-22 right now. If the final budget looks like the legislature's proposed budget, we need to get to work on 21-22 right now. Because even if the reductions are eliminated for this year, we know they're coming. The federal government and the state government are spending way too much money. Their revenues are way too low to support education budgets the way we want them supported in the multi-year. If we wait until next May or June to start trying to make reductions for 21-22, it's going to be too late. So again, that's why we're being critical on every expenditure now, and we'll start working on a plan once we know a little bit more about where we stand for 21-22 and beyond. Looking briefly at the restricted general fund, you see that it has a positive ending balance all 4 years. That balance is coming down as carryover balances get spent. Nothing really surprising here or concerning. We just assume that the revenues from the state and the federal government will go down over time. We will spend down our carryover balances. Looking briefly at the other funds, again, no real red flags or surprises here. All funds are solvent. That could change, obviously, depending on what happens to funding for those other programs as well. But at this time, we believe all those funds will be okay.
Steve, why is the cafeteria special revenue so much higher at the ending balance next year?
Yeah, you know, I just noticed that myself. That's a great question. I think that may be a typo. So I'm gonna have to check on that and get back to you. That doesn't make sense to me either. Yeah, thank you for that. I'm wondering that myself. Also, Fund 21 does not reflect the bond sale that we did last month. The funds had not come in yet when we built this budget, so we decided to wait. Those funds have come in since then. So that building fund, you can put a 25 million in front of those other numbers. It looks a little different now. So closing thoughts. You know, our budget is a product of the educational programs we offer, right? They kind of work hand in glove. What do we offer? How do we spend our money? We don't know what our educational programs are exactly for next year. And our budget's also based on the state's education budget. And we don't know what that is still. When we know something, we will adapt and we will come back to the board and come back to our stakeholders and begin planning for 2021 for real and for 21-22 and beyond. And with that, I'll turn it over for any questions or comments.
So I'm sure this level of uncertainty is just lovely for you as a chief business officer. Normally, you don't like quite that much uncertainty. So questions from the board. Trustee Nelson?
I wanted to clarify for myself on slide number 10, the SCG carriover. There's almost $640,000 of extra funding that we're not really sure what it's going to go to, but because we have it, we're just going to earmark it. Is that what is being proposed?
Yes, and when we get closer to a plan, Trustee Nelson will bring that back to you with more detail. And I'm just going to give you an example of the unknown. We've been looking at some software programs that things like Acellus and Odyssey, where the courses are defined that kids could take if they're in a remote environment. So we're exploring things like that. If we bought a seat for every student in our school district, it would cost almost $200,000. I'm not suggesting, we haven't made that decision yet, but that's just an example of some of the big ticket items that we're talking about. We do know that we need to do more professional development, especially if we're going to be in the remote learning environment. And, you know, we need to find time to pay people and to deliver that professional development as well. That's just one example. So it's earmarked for those types of purposes.
So let me throw an idea out. Instead of putting it in a fund that can be used for all kinds of crazy ideas, would it be better to put it into our savings account? And as you come up with ideas, you come back and you go, hey, board, we found this really great idea. We think we ought to take this out of the reserves and pay for it.
We can definitely do that because it's already in the supplemental and concentration grant fund, though it can't count towards our unappropriated resources. It has to still get spent for those purposes eventually. But yeah, we definitely come back with a plan, but it really doesn't help us with it helps us with cash, it doesn't help us with our total reserves.
I guess you guys are very trustworthy people, and I really appreciate what you do. It has always seemed like a good idea to have the board have some clause into extra money just so we can put in our 2 cents before it's spent. And if we put it, and maybe I'm misunderstanding how it's designated here, but if it's put in this pot as I'm looking at it, if there's a project that comes up that costs, you know, $300,000, you guys can just spend it without checking in with us. Does that make sense?
Well, it would be designated for those specific purposes related to reopening school next year, those different categories. But Trustee Nelson, if the board wanted to set some of that aside for, I know over the years we've been talking about quote unquote a reserve for supplemental and concentration grant funding. And as you all know, we needed to cut more than we did in supplemental concentration grant funding. That's why you see that 112,000 in the top line of that slide that you mentioned, Trustee Nelson. So you could say to us, you know, set aside of that 600,000, set aside 300 as a reserve. And if you end up needing more, please come back to us.
But Trustee Nelson, is your point that you just kind of want to know as they're going along what those expenses are and what those decisions are?
We're in a time of crisis right now. I'm a huge proponent of having a healthy savings account so we can help bridge these times of uncertainty. And I guess I'm feeling a bit like a control freak right now, and it feels like we should be very cautious with our spending, and I would like to help. It seems like that is a good idea for us as a board to do.
Okay, thank you. Justine Fernandez.
I disagree. I mean, I feel like we're not going to be saving money right now because we don't have any money to save with these big budget cuts. We have to sort of use what we have to fill the holes for right now. And I think we should give administration the flexibility to decide how they think this should be spent, given that we know what they're going to be spending it on, and not have to have us come back and weigh in on it, because they're obviously going to be making decisions about what is needed, and they're not going to have a month probably to think it over. And I think we know what it's going to be spent on. We know that the general categories. I would support leaving it as is so that they can make the decisions they feel is best. And let us know, but I don't think we need to approve it.
Okay. Trustee Van Sant?
I actually kind of like the idea of a supplemental concentration grant reserve, as Trustee Nelson was explaining it. I guess I always get a little, I'm a little thrown off when we don't spend $1.5 million on something that we budgeted. So, I mean, and you didn't really go into detail, Mr. Bergman, about why we ended up with that much savings, but it just makes me question what we had done wrong in terms of budgeting and why we ended up with that much savings. I know that's been a super crazy year, so you probably have a good answer for that. But I do think when we have unexpected, fairly large savings, we should be questioning what led to that. And to me, I'm comfortable with setting aside some in a reserve for a supplemental concentration grant, because I think we will end up spending it. And I think the administration will come back and say what they need it for, but it's just, to me, makes sense. So I'm not talking, I don't necessarily think we need the whole thing with that level of control, but if we're looking, if I'm remembering the same slide, it was roughly $690,000 in this like professional development pile, right? So that's a lot of money. And I'm sure we would say yes to however it was, you know, eventually going to be used, but somehow not spending $1.5 million out of $6 million or however much supplemental concentration grant is a little surprising to me. I just made up the 6 million. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's 10. I don't know.
It's close to 11, and I'm truthfully not surprised by it, because for the last 3 months we have been on remote learning, and a lot of those, you know, we didn't have leadership network, for example. Our last leadership network, we didn't have teachers doing additional hourly work that they normally do out of those types of funds. I'm really not surprised that it's that high.
Okay, I wasn't sure, because you know, so much of our money is tied up in like salaries and things that had to carry on anyway, but that makes sense, Superintendent Cuban.
Yes.
Right, and part of that too was like the Chromebooks that we were going to go and try to buy this year. Well, that expense is going to get shifted to next year, so that's a big chunk of it right there by itself.
Well, that's 400,000 right there, right?
But we're not questioning that 400,000, right? I mean, we're like,
no, I know, but you're saying of the 1.5 million, there are, you asked for the reasons. There are things like that too.
You mean we were always planning on buying the Chromebooks? We're just now shifting it to next year.
Correct.
So what you're saying? Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, but it actually was 12.9 million for this year for SCG. It's the final number.
And I'm comfortable setting a little bit of it aside, but we do need flexibility. The last 3 months have been, we've had to make decisions pretty rapidly. They've been good decisions, but you know, we've spent money on hotspots for students who didn't have internet. And I've appreciated the flexibility to, for us to be able to do things like that, because we've had some pretty urgent needs that haven't been able to wait for a board meeting. So again, I really appreciate the flexibility, but I'm comfortable with setting some of it aside, especially knowing that we hopefully have the federal funding coming. You know, if we set $300,000 aside and to be determined, or a reserve of some sort, I would be comfortable with that.
Absolutely.
Other board members? Steve?
I'd actually like to correct that cafeteria fund number we saw back on slide 18. It should have been 44,746 each year, not the 1.1 and 4.8 million we saw. I don't know where those numbers got pulled from, but I apologize. We'll fix that.
I love the fact that you can just fix it in real time.
I know that finance people hate that. They're like, what's that number wrong? I must fix it right now.
Very much so, yes.
Trustee Barrett?
I'll just weigh in that I think that Deb's amount of 300,000 to set aside, and then if something comes up, you need that, you know, let's go with it. But I think setting aside amount like that is a good idea.
Other questions, comments? Okay, so I guess at this point then, and again, for the public who are watching, we have seen this draft budget at least 2 other times. So this is not the first time we're seeing it. Otherwise, we would have a lot more questions. I would be looking for a motion to recommend the approval of the 2023 strategic plan documents as attached, with or without an amount of perhaps 300,000 to be set aside as a supplemental and concentration fund set aside, so to speak, that would need to come back to the board for further spending. So it's probably going to be one of those things where whoever makes the motion is going to be able to influence the policy decision here.
I would make that motion that we set aside that $300,000. And I guess I would maybe add to the motion that we also, when the 1.4 million comes, have a report out on how that's going to be spent as well. Would that make sense to combine them kind of maybe together? Because that again seems like a pile of money that you're expecting, but you don't have it, so you're not quite sure how you're going to spend it yet, but it should be related to COVID response. So I think it'd be good for the board to have an update on what you're thinking about that money as well.
Absolutely.
It's sort of as a general guideline, I think squirreling away money in this time is a good idea because things are gonna be needed.
So just to clarify the motion, it is to approve the I'm in the wrong section here, is to adopt the 2021 budget with a caveat of 300,000 set aside from SCG and with the with direction to staff to report back with plans about any federal funding that is received. Is that your motion?
That is my motion, and I'm not going to try to make it more complicated than that, but because there's so much unknowns and we don't know, this is not part of the motion, I'm just getting to it. Okay. Because we have conflicting viewpoints between the governor and the legislature. We don't know how much the feds are going to bail out the state. It's obvious that Mr. Barrickman's going to have to come back to us with quite a different looking budget, probably maybe next month, and then maybe again another month later. So I think we'll have opportunity to, without anything special, learning more about that 1.4 million probably at our next board meeting, to be honest, because something will happen between now and July in terms of clarity. It may not be full clarity, but it'll be a little more clear.
Okay.
Not changing my motion.
So you'd like to eliminate C from your motion, and now we are simply adopting the budget as presented with the one change of setting up a $300,000, so to speak, supplemental concentration fund reserve.
Sure.
But it's not really a reserve because we know it will be spent soon.
Sure. And I'm sorry I let us on a red herring about the federal funds.
Quite all right. That's the definition of a red herring.
I will second that motion.
Okay. Is the motion understood? Or do we need to restate it? Or does it make sense?
Makes sense.
So,
okay.
So of the supplemental concentration, we're approving the 400,000 for Chromebooks, we're approving the 200,000 for equity work, and we're approving roughly half of the professional development money. Or I can't remember exactly what the number was, because 300 set aside for reserve.
And the rest of the budget.
Fabulous.
And the rest of the budget.
Fabulous summary. Okay, any further questions for staff or the maker of the motion? No, hearing none. All those in favor of this adoption, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Well, congratulations on your first budget there, Mr. Barrickman, which will change drastically.
First of many iterations. Yes, thank you.
We will now move on to agenda item E3, establishing the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee.
We are very excited to present to the board tonight members to be appointed to our Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. This will be the group of community members who will ensure that the district is operating within the ballot language of Measure A. And I'm really grateful to these people for stepping forward to serve on this committee. We are still looking for a representative from a taxpayers association and are still taking applications there, but we have filled every single spot. We are recommending, we had 3 applicants to the community member at large. We're required to have 2. We're just recommending that we appoint all 3 of them. So this slate of people is presented to the board. Their applications are attached to the agenda, and we look for approval for appointing these members to the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee with gratitude.
And I have been in touch with some taxpayer associations, and they have said that they will come forth. It's probably my lack of diligence in reminding them. Trustee Arkin?
I just want to say that I think we got lucky with this, who we got to sign up. I mean, there's a bunch of really nice, good people who I think are going to know what they're doing. And I'm glad it worked out. I was not sure, like, who wants to do this?
Right.
So,
Who might
so
volunteer?
whatever you did, however you sent it out, I think we have a nice group here.
Great. Does that mean you're making?
And so I would like to make a motion to accept all these guys, 7 of them, I think, as our new, what do we call them?
Oversight committee.
Our oversight. Thank you, Carolyn. Our new oversight committee.
Okay, so the motion is to approve the slate as presented of all 7. And then we will continue our outreach for the taxpayer slot. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Mr. Diaz, is there any further discussion or questions?
I appreciate these people putting time into this as well. We should definitely extend our appreciation to them.
Definitely. Well, wonderful. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? Any conflicts? No? Okay, then that is our oversight committee to start with for Measure A. Fabulous. Our next item, E4, 2020 CSBA Delegate Assembly Runoff Election, Region 1B. So
we, the board submitted Trustee Nelson as a write-in candidate for CSBA Delegate Assembly Subregion 1B. And evidently there were 2 write-in candidates that got moved forward. And so there is now a runoff, and we are recommending that the board approve Trustee Nelson as its voted in delegate for this runoff election.
I move approval of Tyler Nelson as our delegate.
I second.
With enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any way we can?
Let's take a vote first.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Any further discussion? Let's vote and then we can discuss further. All right. All those in favor of endorsing and voting for Trustee Nelson to represent us at CSBA, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Okay. Trustee Nelson abstains.
Well, do we need to go pounding doors?
Yeah, can we campaign for Tyler somehow?
Yeah, how do we do this?
I have reached out to my counterparts in our Mendocino County school districts. And if you have, I could if there is a trustee who'd like to know who's responded, I'd be happy to let you know. And you could reach out to board members if a particular district had not responded. So just let me know.
And what's the deadline?
August.
Okay.
Oh.
Thank you for your trust and support.
Thank you.
Volunteerism.
Get to work.
Okay. At this point, we're going to go on to section F, Parent and Community Partnership. Superintendent, please add to our knowledge.
I will be very brief tonight because I know it's been a long meeting and you've heard the crux of the work that we have been doing, but I just want to echo everybody's work on the last week of school, including our graduation and promotion checkout processes. I was able to participate in several and stop by, and I know the community, the parents and kids were really grateful for what we were able to give to them within the context of what we're doing. The Ukiah High School virtual graduation video will be played. We just put that out today on, I just want to make sure I get this right, on July 2nd. It's a Thursday at 6 p.m. So we will be showing that then, and we're getting the word out about that. But I'm just really grateful for everything. At Ukiah High School, I felt like I was at a Student of the Month ceremony for over 320 students. The administration talked about each and every student. Teachers wrote sentiments about students, and it was very heartfelt. And so we have a very large high school, and it felt very personalized. And I would say that is the case at every single promotion and graduation checkout process that we had. We also had elementary schools that did very unique things to say goodbye to their students. There were drive-bys that happened. And I really appreciate the very creative efforts that everyone has gone through to try and keep kids and families connected to our schools. And again, I know I said this at the last meeting, a huge shout out to our students for hanging in there with us and trying to stay engaged in your learning. And then to the parents for everything that you did to attempt to motivate your students to stay engaged. I know how hard it was. And also to jump in and be your kiddos' teachers, academic teachers. I'm looking forward eventually to getting back to some sense of normalcy. I also want to thank the board for everything that you've done to support us. It's been quite a challenging year. I barely remember back to last October when we were dealing with power shutdowns. It's definitely been a very taxing year. And our staff, our teachers, for very quickly moving to a remote learning environment. I think we've all learned a lot, and we'll improve on what we do. But that heart that our staff uses to engage people, it always warms my heart. So I'm just really grateful to end this. I'm grateful that this school year is over, but I'm really, really grateful for our amazing, resilient staff and community. I feel very fortunate to be the superintendent here. So thank you, board, for everything.
Right back at you.
Yes.
Trustee Nelson. Don't know why I called on you, but.
I'm glad you did. Most of the time I'd say, no, Ann, I don't need anything. I'm speaking as a parent. The graduation ceremony at the high school was extraordinary. It was, our expectations were, and I think it was rough for everybody, kind of going, oh, what the heck are we going to do here? Those folks put in just an incredible amount of time and effort to make us feel very special. So that I'll remember it for a long time. It was really neat. They did a really extraordinary job. And I heard we heard a little bit from Principal Barrett tonight about his experience in the heat, and just heard some really great stuff about the junior high schools as well. We have an amazing district, and I'm really appreciative.
Thank you. Trustee Diaz, you also had a graduate, didn't you?
Yes. I was there, and I was also very impressed with what we saw. I remember explaining to my wife, oh, it's going to be, we're going to get to the parking lot, get off the vehicle, the student goes one way, gets their certificate, and then we go to another side, and we just encounter each other and out the door. It was very nice. So it was I couldn't imagine that. So thank you very much, all of the school staff that participated in all those long days. I saw Nicole, thank you. I saw you there, and Deb, and of course, it was amazing.
Good. How wonderful. How wonderful. So do any other board members want to offer anything under F2 board member report? Trustee Van Sant?
I'll be very brief because I didn't have a graduate, but I did hear really good feedback. So I just wanted to echo that as well from other people who have had graduates. they were surprised at how wonderful it was. So hats off to all of you.
Trustee Barrett?
Not on the graduations, but one thing that I really missed this year was our retirement celebration. That was something I always looked forward to every year. And I have really been pleasantly surprised at the retirement captions on Facebook of people that are retiring. And I appreciate it so much because it gives me a chance to respond and say something to those retirees. So thank you for doing that. That's great.
That was like, right. It's not the same as the group celebration, but what a great thing to do. And it's been fun to read how former students are weighing in because they're on Facebook. It's been fun.
Right.
Is Doug doing those for communications? Is he preparing those?
Yes, it was a joint effort between Assistant Superintendent Glenser and Doug Schald and our principals.
Wonderful, thank you. Anything else to add under community partnerships? Okay, hearing none then, we would look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I so move.
Is there a second? And second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Wait a minute. Don't we have to do the student and the ratification, the action? Did we go backward?
We do, but first we have to finish this because then I'll go back.
Okay.
All right, so just to make sure, that was everybody voting for the consent agenda. Were there any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, now we will go back to G, which was skipped for no apparent reason. I would like to know if there is a motion to readmit student AA 0618 2020.
I so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? And then I would look for a motion to deny readmission to student BB 0618 2020, but the family may apply for reinstatement for the spring semester of 2021.
I so move.
And I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any nays? Okay. Then we had the ratification of Chief Business Officials Employment Agreement. Is there a motion to ratify as presented?
And so move.
Moved. Is there a second?
Second it.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so since we've already done H, we will now go on to I, planning. And I heard that the meeting is not exactly set for July 17th, that staff will be in touch with us about what the best date is for that. And just so that we have it on our calendar, when is the regularly scheduled next meeting? Would that be the August 13th?
It's August 20th.
20th. Thank you. Okay.
With agenda planning on August 11th.
Oh my gosh, you can actually plan that far ahead. That is impressive. Ms. Munoz. August 11th, that is a Tuesday. I will not be at the National Child Support Conference in Anaheim, as it says on my calendar here. So I will certainly be available. Who would like to join me?
Do we have a date?
Yes, August 11th.
August 11th.
I would if there aren't two other people, but if there are two, I'll defer.
Okay, well, it looked like it was Carolyn and Jose last time. So this time it is Zoe and
I can do it.
B.
Unless somebody else wants to do it, who hasn't done it.
Well, we know it's not going to be Tyler in August.
Okay.
You guys. Gals, people.
Okay. August 11th,
Tuesday, the 11th.
it's a Tuesday, and what time?
At noon.
Noon. Okay.
And we'll assume it's still by Zoom, but we'll see as we get closer.
Okay.
Hope not.
Is there anything else for the good of the order? Superintendent, board members? No, hearing none. We are adjourned at 9:20 or so. Stay well, everybody.
guys.
Take care.